Berakhot 9a. Apparently the time in question is considered night, as otherwise he could not thereby fulfill his obligation to recite Shema during the night. 9a. The Gemara answers, no, there is no contradiction. Actually, the time just before sunrise is considered day, and the fact that it is referred to here as night is because there are people who are still asleep at that time, and if the need arises, it can be characterized as beshak beka, when you lie down, despite the fact that it is already day. Rabbi Aha, son of Rabbi Hanina, said that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, the halakha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said it in the name of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Zera said, as long as he will not recite, help us lie down, hashkivinu, as well, after reciting the evening Shema before sunrise, as the blessing, help us lie down, is a prayer that we sleep in peace, which is inappropriate in the morning. That is how the halakha was taught in the study hall. However, when Rav Yitzhak Bar Yosef came to Babylonia from Eretz Yisrael, where Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi lived, he said that this ruling that Rabbi Aha, son of Rabbi Hanina, said that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said was not said explicitly by Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rather, it was stated that he held that the halakha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said it in the name of Rabbi Akiva, based on inference. The incident was as follows. This pair of sages got drunk at the wedding of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's son, and fell asleep before reciting the evening Shema. By the time they awoke, dawn had already passed. They came before Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and asked him if they could still recite the evening Shema. He said to them, Rabbi Shimon is worthy to rely upon in exigent circumstances. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi did not rule in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and in a case where there are no exigent circumstances, one may not rely on this ruling. The Mishnah relates that there was an incident where Rabban Gamaliel's sons returned very late from a wedding hall, and they asked their father if they were permitted to recite Shema after midnight. The Gemara asks, and until now had they not heard this halakha of Rabban Gamaliel? Were they unaware that he held that one is permitted to recite the evening Shema after midnight? The Gemara answers that Rabban Gamaliel's son did not ask him his opinion. Rather, they said to him as follows, do the rabbis fundamentally disagree with you concerning this halakha, holding that Shema may be recited only until midnight? If so, when there is a disagreement between an individual sage and many sages, the halakha is in accordance with the opinion of the many, in which case we must, in practice, follow the opinion of the rabbis. Or perhaps do the rabbis hold in accordance with your opinion that the time of the evening Shema extends throughout the night, and that which they say that it may only be recited until midnight is in order to distance a person from transgression? If the latter is true, Then, when there are extenuating circumstances, one may recite the evening Shema after midnight. Rabban Gamaliel replied to his sons, "The rabbis agree with me, and you are still obligated to recite Shema. The rabbis say that Shema may only be recited until midnight in order to distance a person from transgression. But after the fact, even the rabbis permit recitation after midnight." We learned in the Mishnah that Rabban Gamaliel told his sons, and that is not only with regard to the halakha of the recitation of Shema, but rather wherever the rabbis say until midnight, the mitzvah may be performed until dawn. The Gemara questions the formulation of the Mishnah. Does Rabban Gamaliel say until midnight? That he teaches, and not only did they say. Rabban Gamaliel does not restrict the time for the recitation of Shema until midnight. So why does he say, and not only do they say, implying that he agrees with that stringency? The Gemara explains that this is what Rabban Gamaliel said to his sons, even according to the rabbis, who say that the mitzvah may be performed only until midnight. The biblical obligation to perform the mitzvah continues until dawn, and that which they say that it may only be recited until midnight is in order to distance a person from transgression. In our Mishnah, Rabban Gamaliel cites several cases where a mitzvah that must be performed before midnight may actually be performed until dawn. Among them, the burning of fats and limbs on the altar. The Gemara notes, in our Mishnah, the eating of the Paschal lamb was not taught among those mitzvot that may be performed until dawn, indicating that the mitzvah of eating the Paschal lamb does not extend until dawn. The Gemara raises a contradiction to this conclusion based on a Berakhot, the mitzvot of the recitation of the evening Shema, the recitation of Hallel on the nights of Passover, accompanying the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb, as well as eating the Paschal lamb, may all be performed until dawn. Rab Yosef said, "This is not difficult, as these two sources reflect two conflicting opinions. This, our Mishnah, is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, while this, the Berakhot, is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. As it was taught in a Berakhot with regard to the verse discussing the mitzvah to eat the Paschal lamb, and they shall eat of the meat on that night, roasted over fire, and matzot with bitter herbs shall they eat it." Exodus 12:8. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says, "He is stated on that night, from which we cannot determine when night ends." The same expression is encountered later in the same chapter. "And I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from person to animal." Exodus 12:12. We know that when the firstborns were struck down based on the verse, "Thus said the Lord, at about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in Egypt shall die." Exodus 11, verses 4 and 5. Therefore, just as in the verse below, the striking of the firstborns took place until midnight. As stated explicitly in the verse, so too in the verse here, the mitzvah to eat the Paschal lamb continues until midnight. Rabbi Akiva said to him, "Was it not already said, 'Thus you shall eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, your staffs in your hands, and you will eat it in haste, for it is the paschal offering for the Lord'?" Exodus 12:11. Therefore the paschal lamb may be eaten until the time of haste. Since the time of haste is when Israel left Egypt, and it is said, "You will not leave every man from his house until the morning." Then the paschal lamb may be eaten until dawn. If that is so, why does the verse state, "on that night"? The Gemara explains that the phrase "on that night" is necessary because without it, I might have thought that the paschal lamb is eaten during the day, like all other sacrifices, which must all be slaughtered and eaten during the day. Therefore, the verse states, "on that night," to underscore that this particular sacrifice is eaten at night and not during the day. Essentially, the difference between these two opinions revolves around which word they deem significant. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah considered the word night as the key word, which Rabbi Akiva considered the word haste as the key word. The Gemara begins to analyze their statements. Granted, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, who has the tradition of a verbal analogy between the phrase "on that night" with regard to the eating of the paschal lamb and the phrase "on that night" with regard to the striking of the firstborn in Egypt, it was necessary for the verse to write "that" in order to indicate that these times are parallel. However, according to Rabbi Akiva, who has no such tradition, what does he do with that? Why is it necessary to emphasize "on that night"? The Gemara answers, "On that night" comes to exclude another night, as one might otherwise have concluded that the paschal lamb may be eaten for 2 nights. It would have entered your mind to say, since the paschal lamb falls into the category of sacrifices of lesser sanctity, and peace offerings are also sacrifices of less sanctity, just as peace offerings may be eaten for 2 days and 1 night, i.e. the day that they are sacrificed through the following day, as we learned in the Torah, so too the paschal lamb may be eaten for 2 nights instead of 2 days. In other words, one might otherwise mistakenly conclude from its parallel to peace offerings that the paschal lamb is to be eaten for 2 nights and the day between them. Therefore, the verse teaches us specifically on that night, i.e., on that night it is eaten, and it is not eaten on another night. The Gemara asks, if so, from where does Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah derive that the paschal lamb cannot be eaten for 2 nights? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah derives this conclusion from the verse, "It should not remain until the morning." Exodus 12:10. If one is prohibited from leaving over any part of the sacrifice until the morning, he is certainly prohibited from leaving it over until the following night. Therefore, it is unnecessary to cite an additional source to teach that the paschal lamb may only be eaten on the first night. And why does Rabbi Akiva require that to derive that the paschal lamb may not be eaten on the second night? According to Rabbi Akiva, if it was derived from the verse, It should not remain until the morning. I would have said, what is the meaning of morning? It means the second morning, as the Torah does not specify until which morning the Paschal lamb may not be left, until the first morning or the second morning. Therefore the Torah needed to write on that night and no other. And what would Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah respond? He could have said to you, if it is not otherwise noted, every unmodified mention of the word morning in the Bible refers to the first, i.e., the next morning. If that were not the case, no biblical text could have any definite meaning. Concerning the Tanaitic dispute between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah regarding until when the Paschal lamb may be eaten, the Gemara remarks, the dispute between these Tanaim is parallel to the dispute between those Tanaim who disagree over the same issue. As it was taught in a Bereta with regard to the verse, there you will offer the Paschal lamb in the evening when the sun sets, at the time when you left the land of Egypt. Deuteronomy 16:6. Upon closer examination, it seems that this verse mentions 3 distinct times. In the evening refers to the afternoon until sunset. When the sun sets refers to the time of sunset itself. And the time when you left the land of Egypt refers to, as explained in Exodus, the early hours of the morning. Therefore it seems that these times parallel the different stages of the mitzvah of the Paschal lamb, and it is regarding these details that the Tanaim disagree. Rabbi Eliezer says, in the evening, the afternoon, you slaughter the sacrifice. From when the sun sets until midnight, you eat it. And at the time when you left the land of Egypt, you burn what remains from the sacrifice, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. Rabbi Yahashua says, in the evening, the afternoon, you slaughter the sacrifice. From when the sun sets, you eat it. And until when do you continue eating? Until the time when you left the land of Egypt, meaning until morning, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara cites an alternative explanation of the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Abba said, everyone agrees that when the children of Israel were redeemed from Egypt, were given permission to leave, they were redeemed only in the evening, as it is stated, in the spring the Lord, your God, took you out from Egypt at night. Deuteronomy 16:1. And when they actually left, they left only during the day, as it is stated, on the 15th of the first month, on the day after the offering of the Paschal lamb, the children of Israel went out with a high hand before the eyes of Egypt. Numbers 33:3, indicating that they actually went out during the day. However, with regard to what did they disagree? They disagreed with regard to the time of haste. As it is written, you will eat it in haste, for it is the Paschal offering of the Lord. Exodus 12:11. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah held, what is the meaning of haste? It is the haste of the Egyptians at midnight, as they hurried to the houses of the people of Israel to send them away, in fear of the plague of the firstborn. And Rabbi Akiva held, What is the meaning of haste? It is the haste of Israel in the morning, as they rush to leave Egypt. Similar to Rabbi Abba's statement, it was also taught in a Berakhot regarding the verse, "The Lord, your God, took you out from Egypt at night." The question arises, did they leave at night? Didn't they leave during the day? As it is stated, on the day after the offering of the Paschal lamb, the children of Israel went out with a high hand. Rather, this teaches that the redemption began for them in the evening. Since the last topic discussed in the Gemara revolved around the exodus from Egypt, the Gemara cites additional Aggadic midrash on that subject. With regard to the verse, "Speak, please, in the ears of the people, and they should borrow, every man from his fellow, and every woman from her fellow, silver and gold vessels." Exodus 11:2. The word please, is unclear. The students of the school of Rabbi Yanai said, please, is nothing more than an expression of supplication. Why would God employ an expression of supplication in approaching Israel? The Gemara explains that the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moses, "I beseech you, go and tell Israel, I beseech you, borrow vessels of silver and vessels of gold from the Egyptians in order to fulfill the promise I made to Abraham in the covenant between the pieces, so that